All right, welcome everybody. It is the third Wednesday of every month. That means it is Office Hours, our live stream where we take your questions from the audience. And 1 second.
Stream them live.
I have double audio going. Hold on 1 second. We are just
need the technical difficulties bumper.
Yeah, just when we think we get it right. I'm just going to close that tab.
I should make a technical difficulties bumper with Luna wearing a construction hat. This is going to happen.
I like it.
Yes. So give me a second here.
Or maybe just a GIF of a pod going to crash loop back off over.
Oh.
Yeah. Is anybody else getting double audio? If we could just get a quick audio check from the audience, that would be great.
I will pop that open.
1 2 1 2.
Here it is. I found the double audio. I'm just done. Okay, we ready to get started? Sorry, everybody. So the way this works is we hang out office-hours on the Kubernetes Slack, and then we take all your questions that you've been asking throughout the week, and we answer them in as much time as we can. So with that, we have a new guest panelist and everything. So everybody introduce yourselves. We will go Jeff, Bob, Ilya, and Chris.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Sika. I work at the University of Michigan. My title is Research Database Administrator, and titles don't really mean much. I mainly work with Kubernetes doing things like batch jobs and also things like Jupyter Hub and the dashboard.
Hi, my name is Bob Killen. I also work for the University of Michigan and generally share an office with Jeff. But today we're both working from home. I am a research cloud administrator, and I get to play with Kubernetes on-prem and do all sorts of crazy fun things with federation, networking, and other crazy stuff.
Hey, folks. I'm Ilya from London, work for Weaveworks, and been working on various thing. Back in the day, kubeadmin, these days, cluster API, and EKS control. And the EKS control is kind of my main project at the moment, but I'm happy to talk about all the things, including networking and GitOps potentially. Thanks.
All right, so that's me now. So I'm the new guy. I'm Chris from the from the city of Ottawa. I am the resident Kubernetes admin. I'm a CKA. My title is intermediate developer integrator. I work with or the team lead with their DevOps and DevOps initiative here, and I've been working with Kubernetes professionally for the last year and a half and fiddling with it for about the last 2 years.
Awesome. So if people have questions about the CKA,
happy to answer.
They need to ask them.
I passed it.
All right. So let's go over how this gets started. Before we start, though, I'd like to thank Giant Swarm, StockX, Packet, Pusher.com, Red Hat, Samsung SDS, Weaveworks, VMware, Zing, Huawei, the University of Michigan, and the City of Ottawa, Ontario, Canada, for allowing their engineers to answer user questions today. So here are the ground rules. You're going to hang out in hash office hours in the Kubernetes Slack. Those of you watching on YouTube, the URL is below here. And just ask whatever kind of questions. Remember, this is a judgment-free zone. The code of conduct is in effect, so please keep it classy. We all had to start from somewhere, so there are no dumb questions, so just ask them. We will do our best to answer your questions, but the panel doesn't have access to your cluster, so live debugging questions are kind of off topic, but we'll do our best to try to get you going in the right direction. Panelists, you're encouraged to expand on your answers with your experiences and pro tips and things like that. And audience, you can help out by pasting URLs to docs, blogs, or things on GitHub that you find interesting. One of the best parts about this is the stream of URLs that's happening while we're discussing a certain topic. That makes it really useful for us. And what we started to do is collecting those URLs and we whack them in the discuss thread so that we have that as a resource for the community. Each one of these sessions is available on YouTube. We have one now, and then we'll have one in about 6 hours for the West Coast of the US to kind of try to give us world coverage. And if you want to sit in on this panel, it's a great way to get back to the community. The commitment is 1 hour a month. You don't even have to show up every time. You can alternate with someone. So as you're available, we would love to have you. We're always looking for help. So if you see the tweet of the office hours in the channel, if you could scroll up a little bit, help us out by retweeting that, sharing the word, that would really help us out. And of course, my favorite is when people bring coworkers and stuff like that. Feel free to watch this during your little, I don't know, stuff your manager makes you do. Might as well hang out, you know. So with that, the final thanks is going to go to Google for sponsoring our t-shirt giveaway. So what we will do is, as you ask questions, the bot like Jeffrey will start to keep track of who's asking questions. And at the end, we will do a raffle that's guaranteed to be random. And you will win a Kubernetes t-shirt that you can redeem at the CNCF store. And with that, chat, how are you all feeling today? Say hello. How do we sound? Hopefully we sound good. And what is the
I don't think Ed's in there today, so we don't have our good.
You know, when Ed is missing, you really can tell. When
Yeah.
Ed's missing. So with that, we're going to get to our first question. Those of you who are listening, there's a little bit of a delay. Feel free to just start typing your questions in chat, and then we will get to them and queue them up. I do want to mention the GitOps questions. I know that's a West Coast one. I'll hit that one third or something. That'll give Ilya a chance to drink more coffee. So the first question comes from Zan C. I hope I didn't butcher that too much. What is the best practice to deal with the auto sidecar injection mess? For example, sidecar upgrade, downgrade, rename in Jaeger operator, multiple auto sidecar injector handling, etc. Any recommended article for this would be appreciated. Do we have any tips?
I haven't dealt too much with the sidecar stuff, but there was the article I found it a little earlier from the guy Dan Woods, who works over at Target, and he did a nice little write-up of his their Kafka installation and how they dealt with sidecars and clusters.
Mm-hmm.
He touched on that and how he had some reservations about sidecars, but how he thinks they're very beneficial. So
that would be awesome. Whack that in the
I'll
chat.
drop that in.
Anybody else have opinions on sidecar lifecycle management, I guess I would call it?
And we're not really using any injector stuff right now. We've played around with it a little bit, but really it's, you upgrade the operator and then you push it out. We haven't had, at least in playing around with it, I haven't had too many problems.
Mm-hmm. And Ilya's just all about his coffee right now. All right, next question comes from Max Guy. Thanks for joining us. It says, pulling large Docker images can be time consuming. Is there a good way to preload certain Docker images and avoid the garbage collection to clean them up to accelerate a pod start?
So it kind of depends on the application you're deploying. For example, Jupyter Hub actually has this pre-puller process that is a daemon set runs across your cluster and will automatically pre-pull notebook images. So that way when the notebook starts, the image is already there. But again, that's built into Jupyter Hub's deployment itself. So you would probably have to build some sort of daemon set yourself that will pre-pull images that you are going to grab. And then also have some sort of lifecycle hook, so if you push a new image, it knows to grab it.
Anybody else?
This doesn't necessarily help with the pre-pulling aspect of it. There are a couple tools out there that will help speed up the distribution of the images. Notably, Alibaba's Dragonfly, which is a CNCF project, and Uber's Kraken.
Let's get URLs for those here.
Just came out a week or two ago.
Yeah.
But essentially, it forms a peer-to-peer network amongst all your nodes and distributes images that way.
Yeah. Has anyone tried Dragonfly? I know they have some integration with Harbor, so that might be a good combo.
We have not yet.
Okay.
But, Oh, the other thing is there's some work being done where will hopefully, this year, be able to mount layers off a shared file system. So if you pre-cache large images to NFS or something like that, you can then just grab this or a diff on top.
Mm-hmm. Nick is pointing out this project that just opened up called Dive, a tool for exploring Docker image layer contents and discovering ways to shrink your Docker image.
Oh, that is awesome. I also just put a link to the presentation at from KubeCon for Harbor and Dragonfly.
Nice. This Dive thing looks awesome. It's like a little tool for you to just see what's in there, and then it shows you little sizes for everything. This is like the coolest animated thing I've seen.
It's sweet. Really cool.
It's super handy for like if you pull an image and they don't like link the Docker file or something, and you can easily explore
exactly what's in there. That's
cool.
See, that's why I love doing this. I learn something new every day.
Yeah,
this is just awesome. I'm gonna have to tell a buddy about this. Okay, do we have any other tips and recommendations around Docker image size?
Start small.
Yeah. I didn't want to bring up the Alpine thing unless you all really want to.
I hear that's a bit of a
I'm
scratch these days.
Yeah.
Scratch.
And has anyone had any related question? Anyone had any experience with the distroless containers? I saw that we are starting to use them upstream. Anyone have strong opinions on that while we're on the topic?
Seems like a great idea.
Yeah, I was like,
I've not used it myself yet. I've used Alpine plenty, and I usually use multi-stage builds. And what I have is like a build container, and then a target container that wouldn't have like the package manager or anything in it. And then I use from scratch and copy the target container where I staged everything into the actual final container. So that's something. It shows some examples, but I mean,
we're using a similar pattern.
Same.
All right. Well, that's good to know. All right. Anything else on images before we move on? Those of you that are just listening in, feel free to just start asking questions in the channel. That's office-hours on the Kubernetes Slack. You should see the address below if you're listening in on the YouTube. Thanks, everyone, for joining us today. We are moving on to our next question. Am I doing these really simple ones here, Bob? Are we skipping?
I would think so, even though I'm not Bob.
Do you want to bring up the GitOps one?
Yeah. 1 second.
I'm pasting it right now.
Okay, good. There we go. Thank you. Here we go. So Nick, who's joined us live, so let's take some time here on this one, says, thoughts on GitOps? Anyone do it? Anyone experience any drawbacks? I want to talk about this a little bit because he also goes on to say this essentially means having in-cluster code, Argo CD, etc., which monitors for Git events and pulls in changes rather than the traditional push approach from external pipelines. And then we did get a ping from the Argo folks who I think are going to try to join us this afternoon with their comments. But Ilya, you're always answering our GitOps questions. Can you kind of give us a little spiel? I also have some, just so you're not answering the same question every month, I also have some follow-up questions on this kind of stuff. So why don't you take a stab at what Nick is asking here?
So one pretty good blog post that would answer this question is actually one that I wrote a couple of months ago. I pretty much answered that question from a slightly different perspective, right? So what is it that you get from GitOps that you don't get if you do what we call CI ops, right? So if you are pushing from some kind of CI pipeline into a cluster, what are all the downsides versus using GitOps? And obviously, I mean, the question is the other way around. What are the downsides of using GitOps? And I know of very few, to be honest. So essentially, if you're to push from like a CI job into a cluster, what you'll get is you'll need to make sure that particular CI job has access to a particular cluster that you want to push into, right? So you have to configure that somehow. You need to provision correct credentials for that, and you need to maintain those credentials. And what if you have multiple clusters, for example? And then are you going to have like a CI job per cluster, or how are you going to do that? Some people put CI into their clusters and manage it that way. And that is a plausible solution. However, there are a few downsides to that also, because now you have to kind of run builds everywhere, right? And if you do that, that's kind of a major challenge because you can't quite roll out existing artifacts, and all these sort of artifacts are going to end up just a little bit different in every single cluster because they're built separately. And you have to like design that with a lot of care, basically, and you'd eventually arrive at something that is a bit like GitOps. And why don't you start there, right? And let me show you the blog post that I wrote.
Yep, and I'll go ahead and catch you up on what people are saying in the channel here. Is Nick is saying we're looking at Argo CD plus customize with a K to do everything, i.e. bootstrap in the cluster 2, namespaces, network policy, resource quota. Is that something people do?
Argo plus customize. I'm not familiar with Argo, to be honest. Okay. We wrote our own GitOps operator called Ipv6, and it is somewhat familiar. It's somewhat similar to Argo, but it's quite different. So you could use Flux with customize, but customize stage would have to run before you check what customize outputs. So you'd have to have some kind of a pre-commit hook or something like that, and check in generated code by customize and pass that on to Flux. We are looking to integrate customize with Flux directly in the future, but we haven't got there just yet. And that would probably leverage kubectl integration with customize, but I'm not in a position to kind of say anything more about it. Okay.
Looks like lots of people are typing.
You're saying you're open to using Flux, or Argo is just. Let me read the question. Probably switch to Flux. I think
looks like some of these are new questions
related to CRDs. What is the open issue related to CRDs that you're referring to? I'd like to see that. Yeah. I
kind of have a semi-related question here, since I know you work with people that are doing or setting up. Like, what are the common challenge? Like, if I was to do this today, what are the 3 things that you feel are
secrets are a bit of a challenge for some people. For example, a lot of people ask us about secrets. Sealed secrets is something that we commonly advise people to use, but at the moment, sealed secrets doesn't actually have very good. Well, it's not been active. It hasn't been actively maintained for a little while, so we're trying to figure out what to do about that. There are a few alternatives that came up recently that we are also looking into. So secrets are one of the challenges. So if you don't have a solution for secrets, like if you don't have Vault or something of that sort, you'd probably be looking to check your secrets in Git in a secure way. So you'd be looking to do something like check encrypted secrets into Git and have something in your cluster that decrypts it, and that's what Sealed Secrets does. But yeah, there are a few challenges with the Sealed Secrets project at the moment, and it's still unclear to people what's the best solution there. And there are a few different style solutions on the market, such as Vault is one of them, right? Vault is unfortunately a pretty large thing to buy into, so you have to kind of like have this whole thing the size of Kubernetes right next to your Kubernetes just to manage secrets. I mean, like philosophically, it seems as complex as Kubernetes, right? So yeah, well,
looks like you tickled Bob's.
Yep, actually, so one thing regarding like running Vault and all that, one model that we've seen and like we've adopted personally is that you wind up with sort of the services cluster or this other cluster that sort of houses those things, and you have very, very restricted access to that. And then your other services can just, essentially talk to that. Although that does sort of become your single point of failure for a lot of things. There are ways of handling that. But that has sort of been the general way that I've seen more people going like the Vault route, especially when they have to deal with more than one cluster.
Yeah, certainly. There's no, I mean, it's like it's hard to imagine an organization which would be using Vault and just a single Kubernetes cluster. They may be using Vault and a single Kubernetes cluster plus some other things that are not on Kubernetes. But yeah, Vault is kind of a big thing where you'd be probably looking to run Vault in context of like multiple clusters or multiple different environments. So yeah, that is just to say that secrets are something that you'd probably want to think about carefully. And the other challenges are, well, the reusability of your configuration, right? So Flux lets you do a couple of things. As of recently with Flux, you can use multiple directories, and you can essentially compose each of your environments as a set of configurations that span multiple directories. So you can have like a very, very common set of configurations in one directory. In another directory, you could have all your region-specific configurations, and in another directory, you could put your cluster-specific overlays, right? And all of that Flux could look at and combine and apply all of that to the cluster, right? So that is something you can do. However, that is very low level, and Helm is something that people use for bundling things together into packages, charts, and we do support Helm in Flux. However, not everybody is a big fan of Helm, and there are various downsides to using it, such as until Helm 3, the security of your cluster is kind of compromised because Helm has to have access to everything. And if you restrict Helm's access, there are a few other challenges that you get there. So, so you mentioned Customize, so that's one other thing, and Customize has emerged fairly recently. So for some people, it's still a learning challenge. And there are some things that Customize cannot do. For example, Customize doesn't do arrays and such things. And it has certain capabilities around some special cases around arrays, but generally it doesn't quite let you do everything that you could possibly imagine if you had a full language to your disposal, because it's a sort of well, it's not a language really, right? It's just a way of overlaying some configurations. So there are challenges with that. And some of us been looking at using JavaScript and TypeScript potentially, or just general programming languages for dealing with configuration and basically using power of a full-blown language to generate configuration instead of somehow managing YAML and finding clever ways of managing YAML or JSON.
Okay, so Nick's posted a link to that CRD issue, and you've posted the blog post. So we're gonna let Nick and Ilya kind of consume these things, and then we'll get back to you so we can hit some more questions. So the next question is going to be from Jose Luis Castellanos. I hope I got that right. Any advice on multi-site K8s deployment? Site 1 is a production site, and site 2 the passive site. That's the way we wanted. Bob, I think this is you.
Okay. I don't know if Federation wouldn't exactly cover this, although you can set your weights and things like that on for multiple clusters. That way, it's just like when you deploy something, things will deploy to your primary cluster, or you can have a certain amount of them deploy between the two clusters. If you have sort of an active passive scenario, that might not be the best thing. If you are like, are you running your sort of passive cluster as an exact copy of your other one, or is it like sort of undersized and will spin things up or completely fail over to it if the other cluster goes down?
All right, so Jose, feel free to, and this goes for any of you when you're asking questions, feel free to just respond back with more details if you feel that we didn't quite answer your question. So we'll give him a quick minute to type while we get to Tiatwaki asks, how much demand is there for IPv6 in the Kubernetes community? How massive of a change is it when it lands? If I'm not mistaken, it was slated for 1.9 and is currently pushed back to 1.14. Any of you keeping track of this one?
Honestly, there really isn't that much. Most of the demand is coming from groups like telcos, and I know some of the cloud providers themselves are interested in this, but most users that I've interacted with aren't even really thinking about it. Their clusters will work just fine in IPv4. They aren't looking to advertise sort of IPv6 like externally into the they don't want to advertise stuff from internally the cluster outside the cluster via IPv6.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so maybe
Can I also add one other thing? As far as I know, there is nothing in 1.14 that is adding IPv6 support. And I think I would know.
So there are some groups that are interested in it. I know Cray and some others are definitely want to see the IPv6 and especially the dual stack stuff land. Honestly, the best way you can sort of push that along would be to make mention that you're looking for that, and if at all possible, get some possibly fund some upstream people to work on it, or toss some developers at to help just sort of push it through.
Yeah, I'm seeing a bunch of stuff on GitHub, but it's not clear to me which is like personal stuff or which is like real.
Yeah,
I wish Tim was here to ask him.
Yeah, I know the goal is to get all that stuff sorted out this year.
Yeah.
Yeah, at the last community meeting update, they discussed that one of their main goals was to get IPv6 out the door in 2019.
Yeah. This blog post is basically repeating stuff that I've heard people in SIG networks say. But maybe we can. Do you have the link to the last community meeting with the SIG network status update? That might, or their slides. Might be.
I'll grab it.
It would work. And then we can start from there, and you can follow up to see. Hopefully that answers your question. If not, #SIG network is a channel on the Kubernetes Slack if you want to talk to the actual people themselves. And that's also useful because you'll probably find a bunch of people that share your use case. So that's always useful. So thanks for the question. Moving on to Daniel. Why is Alpine considered not secure? Which base image is the first choice from a security perspective? What are recommended security policies, e.g. locking Docker Hub access inside organizations to keep Kubernetes clusters secure and safe? I know that last one's a bit of a disconnected from the internet, but so I don't, depending on what you think, whether Alpine is secure or not. I don't. What do y'all think about that? Let's just start with that.
Well, isn't it tough to do that? There's a limited. The CVEs aren't really kept up to date. That's the big issue, especially when it comes to vulnerability scanning. It doesn't pick everything up, so it kind of gives you false positives. That's kind of what I've heard. So correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Sounds like that would be the only thing I could imagine.
Yeah. And in general, like I've used Alpine as my sort of default choice just because it does have such a smaller security footprint, even if there isn't necessarily up-to-date CVEs for it. The fact that there's it's Musil instead of glibc.
Yeah, see, I was gonna say that's my biggest So I know a lot of people who like it, and I've heard people complaining about the CVE thing, but I don't know enough about it to have like an opinion, like a strong opinion. I know I have coworkers that love it. I know I have coworkers that want a normal libc.
I use Alpine too. That's great. Just that's kind of what the rumblings I've heard. So performance-wise, it's great.
Yeah, and then Sujay has pasted in. Thanks. Last security issue I knew was this, and then he posted a link to a security issue with some Alpine things. So, and then he goes on to ask, which base image is the first choice from a security perspective? What are recommended security policies? So let's just talk about images real quick. Do y'all have a preferred one? Max Guy says he likes from scratch. Is amazing where you can get away with it. We talked a little bit about distroless containers earlier, which basically is like from Golang, and then it's just like binary in there. Nick says, I would have thought it generally secure. If you do it via multi-stage builds, you end with pretty much just the binary. We container scan everything through a pipeline using CoreOS's Claire, which I'm going to go ahead and
+1 for that.
I'm going to go ahead.
Harbor, by the way, has Claire integration.
Yeah, we use Harbor here internally, and it's awesome.
Yeah. And then we have Harbor.
Let's see. Regarding that specific post, I think like that's mostly it. Like if you're using someone else's container built off Alpine. Like for us, it'd be easy to like internally, and so if our base images are based off Alpine, it'd be easy for us just to increment, to the next version. But you might not know what someone upstream, like if you're pulling like the Nginx one or something like that, it's built off of.
And how many of you are doing sort of like egress filtering, like in production?
Egress filtering?
Yeah, like kind of disconnected operation.
Yeah. Like
kind of enterprise style where it's like, it makes it really hard for anything to actually ever hit the internet. But, it's a common practice in like larger.
I know people who do that.
Yeah.
The other thing is just like regarding that explicit security update, like there's other ways you can mitigate all that stuff too, like, running read-only images and all sorts of different other fun things.
Okay. Looks like the CRD discussion, hopefully that answers your question. Keep on asking follow-up questions. I think that will make it easier to kind of tease out the question into a bunch of easier to digest sub-questions. Another thing that Daniel did mention, though, an organization to keep Kubernetes cluster secure and safe. I do want to mention that keeping up with the upstream versions is important because over the last 6 months now, as Kubernetes is getting more battle tested, the amount of CVEs, I think, this past year has been a lot more than usual. So people are using it, people are banging it up. So it's probably now more than ever important to keep your version up to date. And then we posted in links to Claire and Harbor there for those of you that want to check those out. Jeff's kind of pasted in the link with the SIG networking status, and that should help find out a little bit more about the IPv6 status. Macintosh is posting in kubernetes-security.info, which let's check this out. This looks like cool.
It's a link. Yeah, it's a link to the book from Liz Rice and Michael Hassenblatt.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, kind of like go-to reference for a lot of those things.
I am bookmarking that one. So we've had Michael on a few times. Hopefully we can get him more. And then we've never had Liz on. We should definitely try to get her on. Okay.
That'd be awesome.
So I'm caught up on the live questions. Feel free. I see a bunch of you typing.
Jose responded back earlier. We missed him.
Where are we looking at?
It's above your Kubernetes warms up.
Here we go. Okay. So going back to his multi-site scenario, he says, yes, exactly what they want is in case site 1 fails, site 2 kicks in, but I do not like because of the sync that is necessary on both sites, but that's how they want to do it.
I mean, you could use a GitOps operator to sync both clusters together. The hard part would just be syncing any sort of stateful data that's existing between the two.
Yeah.
And how you manage the failover of like cluster ingress, that's going to be highly dependent on what you're doing.
Okay. So it feels like the syncing of the stateful data, like I get the feeling that your apps would be the hard part here. And not the cluster itself. So that's probably something to take into consideration. So anything else as far as live kicking things over?
Honestly, not really that I can think of.
Okay, so we're caught up in the live questions. I'm going to go back to the queued up questions. If you have more questions, keep on asking. Jose, hopefully that answered your question. If not, keep on asking, and then we'll see what we can do as far as getting to more details. Let's see, IPv6, Alpine.
We got a new question.
Oh, here we go. Teowaki asks, how do people store, share case configuration in YAMLs, i.e. YAMLs? Do people really just kubectl edits, or is it common to have everything stored in Git? I love this question.
Git.
So this is, I think it was Kelsey that tweeted this, that using kubectl is the equivalent of SSHing manually into a script, and then like not doing that. So so everyone just says Git, but I'm gonna need a little bit more detail from everybody.
So
like how would he set this up to be, your greenfield, you get to do it over?
So like for what we do right now, at least for a lot of the deployments at the university, we have a Git repo for every like major logical application. So like Jupyter Hub, we have a repo that has our Jupyter Hub configs as well as our Jupyter Hub deployment scripts. Mm-hmm. And then whenever we do a Git push or change something, that will actually push the configuration and the deployments onto the Kubernetes cluster it's targeting. Now, mind you, we're doing that in a less than ideal way because we're just using a GitLab runner that we grab kubectl and do kubectl apply with. Mm-hmm. But that's what works for us because it's not that complex of a scenario.
Is anything testing something? Like, does it go to like a pre-prod cluster or run tests or anything?
Yes, just it's not like a pre-prod cluster. It'll actually spin it up locally and then just make sure. I mean, this is not ideal. Again, it makes sure that it starts up, it successfully starts up, and you can get to it. It's not running any kind of integration testing or anything. Okay. But that's what the Jupyter Hub is.
Yeah, one sort of comment on that is like, so a lot of our stuff is we've carved up parts of our clusters and give them over to other groups. So essentially, it's just like, okay, guys, this is your responsibility now. Mm-hmm. It's sort of on you. And most of them have been pretty happy with just, they only have access to the Git repo and they make changes there. And it's also just, they understand GitLab. They understand all this stuff.
Mm-hmm. Chris, what about you?
That's the pattern we're moving towards. Like we're just starting to set up our DevOps initiative. So kind of onboarding everyone into Kube. So we're starting with a repo of just kind of your boilerplate YAML templates. And the idea would be to use something like some form of GitOps. We haven't chosen the tools quite yet for that, but to have everything go through Git and then remove access to kubectl or kubectl from the user. Yeah.
Ilya seems to be just nodding with everybody. And Jeff and Bob, do your users actually have access to kubectl, or do you not? Are you to the point where you don't give them a config?
It depends on the user. Some users actually took the initiative and wanted to have raw access, even though we set up their whole environment with GitLab. Mm-hmm. However, most of them, they just have access to Git and they don't want access to kubectl.
Mm-hmm. We do have very restrictive pod security policies. So if they do happen to push something through that, would normally be a problem, that just sort of fails it out immediately.
Yeah. And do they know, I'm just asking, so let's say I'm working for you, whatever, I push a bad config, things break. Do they know how to like revert and all that stuff? Or is like, oh no, Jeff, help.
No, it'll actually roll itself back unless it's like some weird edge case. If it like would hard fail, it'll roll back.
Okay.
It also doesn't catch like if the application fails, but is still like running and reporting healthy or something like that.
Exactly.
Okay.
But
so they
could essentially,
yeah, there's still a little talking you have to DevOps there still, right?
Yeah, but in our case specifically, that is better just because we're dealing with faculty members. For the group that we're trying to support, they actually prefer having someone that kind of is like a concierge.
Yeah. Sweet. All right. Any other questions on that? I'm definitely going to ask that question for people in the afternoon session as well. So we get a different use case of like whatever Val's clusters are doing right now.
Yeah. I just want to also plug the Open Policy Agent a little bit, just to kind of do a catch-all for those. If you have a specific set of policies within your YAML, you can use that to enforce it. So if someone does apply something and that doesn't exist within their YAML, it can either inject it or fun tool.
Yeah. That is pretty cool.
I've also seen other stuff where like you don't want these users to be able to create like service type load balancer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You can set up a policy with OPA to deny that stuff for like explicit users or namespaces.
Right.
Yeah. And actually to tie back to the question we had earlier about containers, you can also use it to whitelist certain registries. If you have a private registry, you can just like, only pull images from here, otherwise shut it down.
Mm-hmm. All right. Lots of great questions. I feel like we brought up Open Policy Agent like 3 meetings in a row, which is fine. I just think that's interesting. So let's see here. Feel free to keep on asking questions. We have about 20 minutes left. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us so far. Here's how it works. You hop in a hash office-hours on the Slack Kubernetes, on the Kubernetes Slack, sorry. The URL is below, those of you watching on YouTube, and ask your questions. Okay. The next one's from Transducer from Kubernetes User. Says, is there an open source component that works by you know what? I'm going to paste this one. This is an Nginx long thing. Is there an open source component that works by adding these Nginx ingress things, annotations, integrates with Keycloak and provides a JWT token, for example, info on the user and roles in the application that has annotations in its ingress?
I don't know of anything off the top of my head, but you could possibly like script it sort of with like meta controller or, you know, OPA or something like that a bit.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else want to take a stab at this one?
I think that Dex might actually have this out of the box.
Okay.
Let me.
We'll give you some time to research and come back.
Thank you.
I see people typing in the channel, so we'll give them a chance. Condi asks, hello, guys. What are the effects of running control plane components on separated hosts with no access to the pod overlay network? As far as I know, kubectl proxy and kubectl port forward functionality could be affected and probably health checks and other master to pod communications. But I can't find any exact information regarding this topic.
And when you deploy it, even in with like kubeadm, the container form, it's still popping up on like the use like the host IP for a lot of stuff. I have to double check, but I think it's all essentially the host.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we're running with everything separated. CED's on its own server, control plane's on its own server, and the workers are on their own server. We haven't had any issues, but I can't remember exactly how we have the network set up.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's kind of common to make Kubernetes access the actual pod network. So I wonder what is the motivation to this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, you'd probably be able to get away with something where you only allow certain things, not like full-on access to the pod network. But yeah, like for example, in EKS, you have to actually add your VPC subnets to the EKS cluster itself, right? Mm-hmm. So you really have to have full access between the control plane and the pods. So I'm not entirely sure whether you'd be actually able to, but there are probably things you can get away with. There are certain things that you could you don't have to make accessible. So you could only access. You can only like whitelist some ports basically.
Mm-hmm. And moving back to our previous question, Max Guy is talking about OAuth 2 proxy maintained by Joel Speed, who is online now. Welcome, Joel, to answer questions. And FC says, we use a combination of Dex Kate's Authenticator, Keycloak proxy, and Dex to get per ingress auth. And he's tossed some links in there. Thank you. We appreciate that. Okay, moving on. We have a question from Little Python from Kubernetes users asks, what's the difference between a stateful set and a deployment with PVs?
So the behavior is a lot different, like the upgrade behavior and the naming behavior. A deployment with PVs is exactly that. It's going to deploy X number of replicas per what you say you want deployed, and it's going to have persistent storage. But the names of the pods are going to be unique and randomized. Whereas a stateful set will create X number of pods that you want, but they're going to be named in a very precise manner. Usually it is 0 to N, or rather 0 to X. And if you want to do like a rolling upgrade or something, depending on the upgrade policy, that may require manual intervention where you actually have to go and manually delete the pod yourself. Likewise, if you create a stateful set with PVs, the PVCs will actually be named in said similar manner. So like it might be, stateful set pod hyphen PVC hyphen 0. So it's just a way to maintain logical state in Kubernetes when you're trying to not maintain a state.
Everyone happy with that answer? Anything to add to that one?
I could also go into headless services, but that's stateful set versus deployment.
It's okay because we're moving on to another stateful set question. Feels like a follow-up here. Multi-IO asks, if I have a stateful set with 10 replicas and pod 6 should be rescheduled, say due to a node eviction, will it first shut down pods 7, 8, and 9? I don't think so.
No.
Yeah,
No.
it would just...
No, the only time where that would happen is during those rolling upgrades that I talked about, and usually that's actually in reverse order. So it would go like 6 and then 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 until it got back to 6. But no, if it's just rescheduling the pod, it should not have to do anything with the other pods.
Mm-hmm. All right, we're coming down to 15 minutes. That's my reminder for Jeff to start figuring out who's going to win the Kubernetes T-shirt. If you have any burning questions, please feel free to just whack them in the channel there, and we will get to that. And remember, if we read your question online, you'll automatically be entered into the T-shirt contest. So if you haven't asked a question yet and you're listening to the live stream, it doesn't hurt to ask a question. All right, moving on. JM Richa says, does Kubernetes not have an NFS volume provisioner? I thought I could do provisioner : Kubernetes IO/NFS in my storage class, but I'm getting a no provisional volume plugin matched on my volume claim.
There is an NFS provisioner, but I think you have to have it installed separately.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There's two different types of the NFS provisioners too. Ones that like will provision a like provision like serve up NFS and then things like can consume it, or ones that will essentially create subdirectories in a remote NFS like site. Because we're using the client one internally.
We used NetApp for that here, so similar kind of thing.
All right, and that's NFS. This one's interesting. Daniel asks, does anybody know of visualization for Kubernetes that shows how the different components are connected? E.g., imagine I deploy a Helm chart that has a service, endpoints, pods, storage, and I want to see an architecture diagram. I guess they're looking for like the kind of cool manager view, I guess I would call it. That kind of shows.
Have people checked out Weavescope?
I know Weavescope's an option. Datadog has like a kind of hexagon-looking thing, doesn't it? That has these. I've seen a few of these. Like when you walk on KubeCon, I always see one, but I want to keep track of all of these things.
Scope was the one. Scope was the one I was going to recommend.
Yep, both Tuatwaki and James are linking to Scope, and it looks like people are thumbs upping that. Okay, well, that's a good place to start. And Tuatwaki says Weavescope has some pretty bad performance impact, though. Should it?
It depends. So, I mean, like, we've optimized a number of things, and however, one of the things that we used to optimize performance was eBPF, and then we've made that the default way, with the default sort of way to get the network connections. However, there is an issue in GKE where eBPF is not available. There are many things that are not available in GKE out of the box unless you use Ubuntu. So that's one thing. There are a few issues with the performance of Weavescope app, but if that's something that bothers you, you could actually use. Well, you can scale down the app to 0 and only scale it up whenever you want to use it. And so probes have less performance issues. It's the app that actually does the rendering that that often hits the wall. Like, I mean, as in, it's got a lot of work to do, right? So one solution to that is to use Weave Cloud, where we host the actual visualization for you. We also provide login capability for people. People can use their GitHub auth or Google auth to actually log in. So there are a few things you can do about that. Yeah.
Okay, and I see people are typing. Max Guy's also recommending this one. I haven't seen Kiali.io is for Istio. Provides answers to the question, what microservices are part of my Istio service mesh and how are they connected? That's very interesting. I hadn't heard of that. Thank you very much.
Jose asked another question too.
Yep, and then we have two more questions.
Okay.
First is going to be from Anurag asks, is there any documentation for bare metal Kubernetes cluster setup on the Azure cloud provider, just like this one here for AWS? So it looks like they are looking to set it up without using like the managed Kubernetes, right? If it's anything. I don't know anything about this.
I'm just trying to find the question.
Yeah, 9:50 a.m. And then James is adding another link to something called KubeOpsView, which is interesting. I'll definitely check that out. List of URLs are always handy to have. Oh, that's cool. That's kind of very 70s retro. And curses looking style thing. That's cool. So that's another one. And anything left as far as any recommendations for an Azure cloud provider setup?
Honestly, not really. We don't use it, so I don't know about it.
Yeah.
So
I've seen a few for Terraform.
Mm-hmm. Sorry about that one. If we get someone who's smarter with Azure in the West Coast session, I'll go ahead and repeat that question.
You could check out KubeSpray. It's sort of a generic, sort of platform independent thing.
Yeah. And then Dusan has a question. What are the best practices for local development with Kubernetes and Docker? I'm using telepresence so far, and I like it, although there are some limitations. Nick wants to add, I think we'll end up looking at Scaffold if we go down the route of customized, and Scaffold supports it too. Any favorite tools here? I know lots of people like telepresence.
So I personally don't do local development and then work with the remote cluster. I'm using things like Minikube and Kind when I'm doing my local development.
Same.
All right. If anyone has opinions on that one, feel free to do on the channel. James, who's been giving us some really great URLs, also has this other one called Comiser. This one seems AWS specific, but it looks pretty. The dashboard looks pretty dope.
We skipped over a question.
We did. Which one?
If you go back up to Jose's asking about jobs. It's at 9:48.
Yep. So Jose, sorry about that, and this will be second to last question. One quick question about jobs. What would you recommend to do right now? There is a container doing the scheduling, or is it better to move all that to a Kubernetes job?
I'm a little confused by that. So a container is actually the thing that is firing off a job within itself? Because I wouldn't do that. I would definitely have all the jobs run within Kubernetes, because that makes sure that it's going to run and complete. If something goes wrong with the job within the container, chances are that container is actually going to crash and fail, and then it's going to get rescheduled. And you may lose any debugging logs or whatnot.
Yeah. So Jose, we'll give Jose a chance, since he's been pretty active today, so we'll give him a chance to follow up there if he has. And then someone's asking, do we have a thread for tools or a channel on Slack? We definitely have a thread. Here it is, useful Kubernetes tools on Discuss. James, if you want to go ahead and start whacking them in there, that would be great. this thread is old. This started in November, but there's always new tools that you could share, and you can help us revive that and add a bunch of stuff. I haven't heard of this one. Kamiser looks pretty cool. And James says he's on it. Thank you. All right, Daniel, you'll have the last question of the day. And then, oh, wait.
Sorry,
what?
I think we skipped one more. There was a IOAnder.
Wait, where do you see that?
950, right under the best practices for local development.
Oh, any suggestions? Yeah, sorry. Any suggestions on, hey, this is a good thing. Any suggestions on Kubernetes operators? Do you recommend any of the existing frameworks? Is it sane to write a case operator in Python or better to stick with Golang?
Having done that, I would really suggest stick with Golang. Look up Cube Builder. I imagine Bob is about to link what I am saying. Cube Builder was developed out of Google. It is one of the quote-unquote sanest ways of building an operator, and having built a few of them in there, it's pretty nice. There are some limitations, but they are like, we're talking weird edge cases. And the people that are working on Cube Builder are fairly receptive to set edge cases and fixing them.
Mm-hmm. And Joel wants to say there's also a Slack channel, #Cube Builder, on the Slack. All right.
Sally, actually, one of the developers for it, is frequently on office hours too.
Oh, yes, West Coast, for sure, if you have questions about that. All right. Now is it Daniel's turn? Yes, I think so. Hold on, let me just check one more time. Wow, we are busy today. I love it when we're just flooded with URLs. It makes it a lot of fun here. So Daniel asked a question. There are at least 2 Helm charts available for Elasticsearch that be considered official ones. Helm/chart/stable Elasticsearch and Elastic/Helm-charts. Which one would you recommend to be used as the base one to build private adapted to the needs one? We should have asked Matt Farina to join us this morning. Any opinions on this, on where you're finding Helm charts? This feels like it's a good question for the West Coast folks already.
Stable is generally the preferred place to grab at least something from.
Yeah.
We personally don't really use things directly from there. We will sort of use it to inspire us to do our own thing.
Yeah, so my first question would be is, who's pushing to the Helm? Like, are the Elastic people kind of testing in their upstream repo and then pushing to the Helm chart stable repo at a slower rate? Let me look here. Excuse me. Like, I don't see something that explains that relationship.
That will also be changing significantly with V3.
Yeah.
Like the whole like incubator stable sort of monorepo thing will be going away.
Yeah.
And every vendor, it'll be like apt add a remote repository, and every vendor can sort of manage the thing themselves.
Okay. Yeah, so not sure on this one. I would definitely ask this one in the Helm channel. So the Helm channel on the Kubernetes Slack is one of the larger ones. So I would definitely do that. And if we get Matt on the West Coast session, I'll ask him. Because that's something I would like to know. Like,
the other thing is,
go into the stable thing, are you going to get some, like, you don't want the kind of Linux distro situation, right? Where it's like, I'm using this thing because I app got installed it and it's actually 3 years old and someone's idea of stable, but doesn't give you the features you need. Or
do you know if anyone's actually made a chart for Amazon's version of Elastic?
I don't know. You just went for it. What's it called? Helm. What do they call their thing? Open Elastic or something?
I don't know.
We use the hosted version.
You like it?
I just heard that we use it on.
Yeah. Okay.
Actually,
so
I think there's an operator for it.
I'm pretty sure. Search operator. I'm pretty sure. Was it Steve Sloka that wrote this? It is, yeah. One of my coworkers wrote this when he was at the hospital. Has an Elasticsearch operator. I have a buddy that works on something like this, and there's his. I don't know how that relates to the Helm chart or any of that stuff. Just kind of sticking it out there as a URL. All right. So with that, those are going to be the questions. Who won the T-shirt? So the way it works is if you ask questions,
we need to revisit the job question.
Oh, we do.
Yes, the container is doing the scheduling and has the logic to replay failed jobs that become very complex.
Okay, so they have a separate container that's like a scheduling container, and then it's got all his little edge cases in it.
Neat.
That almost sounds like it would make more sense to have it be like redone in Argo, just because then like if a step in that pipeline fails, Argo's the thing that's handling it. I don't like building scheduling logic into an application. It should be handled by something outside of it.
Yeah. And Teotihuacan says, switch to Kubernetes Java. They solve the same problem. Don't reinvent the wheel.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Also, the winner for today's T-shirt.
Wait, did I miss any? Hold on. Did I miss anybody's question?
I don't think so.
I think we're good.
Yeah, I think we're good. If not, we'll go ahead and answer it during the West Coast. We're going to go live again in about 6 hours. So who won the T-shirt? So the way it works is if you show up live, we stick you in a raffle so you can win a Kubernetes T-shirt. Stick around, and I will PM you on Slack with a code that you can use on the CNCF store. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. And I'd like to thank Giant Swarm, StockX, Packet, Pusher.com, Red Hat, Samsung SDS, Weaveworks, VMware, Zing, Huawei, University of Michigan, and the city of Ottawa, Ontario for letting Chris sit in with us. That is in Canada. And as always, a special thanks to Google for sponsoring our T-shirt giveaways. Jose says, thanks, guys. Thanks, everyone, for joining. Who's drum roll?
I put it in the chat.
You did.
It's Daniel.
Oh, cool, Daniel. You've won the shirt. So that works. Everyone congratulate Daniel. So the way this works is from now on, what we're going to be doing is scheduling these as events in the YouTube channel. So you'll be able to set a reminder for the specific session and things like that. And what we're going to start to do is start tweeting these sessions throughout the month so that it's more obvious when they exist instead of being so ad hoc. Otherwise, Ilya might oversleep and not make it next week. So with that, panel, any last comments or things you want to say? Chris, we appreciate your first session. Did you have a good time?
It was a great, it was a pleasure being here. Thanks for having me. I had a great time and learned a lot. So
yeah,
mission accomplished. Hope I helped a little.
Yeah, I hope you join us from now on. And those of you listening, if you want to join us, this is an open panel. This is all volunteer. So, all right, Daniel, I will follow up with Slack and everybody else. Panel, stick around on the Zoom for a bit, and everybody else, we will see you in a few hours when we go live again. Thanks.
Sure.